Have you ever stopped to wonder why golf is so hard? The massive improvements that we've had in technology, the equipment, the balls, the conditions of the course, how smooth the greens roll, yet golfers' handicaps remain basically exactly the same for the last 30 years. Why is this? I'm going to give you the answer today for the first time for a lot of you to help you understand why golf is so hard, why you're struggling with it, and I'm going to give you 3 videos at the end of this that are going to show you exactly how to start ingraining the right habits to help you understand how to play better golf and what it's going to take for you to be a great ball striker that you want to be. And you're going to look like a tour player when you're done working on these drills. So, the first thing is I want you to start thinking critically. I want you to think how I think about when I think about the golf swing. Let's look objectively at some simple things in the golf swing. One, all tour players look relatively the same at impact. We can all agree on that. Their left wrist tends to be flat at impact. You don't see a lot of guys like the typical amateur with this broken down cupped left wrist. The club shaft tends to be leaning toward the target, and they don't tend to chicken wing coming through. So those are 3 things that all tour players tend to do consistently well, that the exact opposite tends to happen in amateur golfers. They all tend to be broken down at impact. The right wrist is flat and extended, the left wrist is broken down, they tend to chicken wing, and the shaft is actually leaning backwards at impact. Now, if the tour player is doing the exact opposite of what you're currently doing, the trick is understanding how they're getting it to do what they want them to do. And why are you doing it the wrong way? Well, let's think about a couple things first objectively. First of all, why is your golf glove on your left hand? That seems like a really stupid, simple question, right? But it's going to make sense in just a second. All golfers, most all amateur golfers, tend to struggle with scooping it and chicken winging it, right? Now, what is one thing that most all amateur golfers have in common? Well, they all tend to be right-handed, right? Playing from the left side of the ball, tend to be right-hand players, right-hand dominant in everything they do in life. You brush your teeth with your right hand, you use your mouse on your computer with your right hand. That's just part of how we all are. We all tend to be left brain dominant, right-hand dominant. In golf, if you want to get into these left-hand dominant positions, you have to learn to swing using your left hand. That's the simple reality of it. This is the bottom line of why you still struggle with golf and what tour players have learned to do differently than what you're doing. The golf glove's on your left hand for a reason. It's because it's the only hand that you have in the downswing when it matters with controlling the club face that can pull in the downswing. Now you see on the rotaryswing.com website, I talk a lot about pushing versus pulling. It's a very simple physics lesson that's going to take you a long way with understanding your golf swing. If you want something to be stable, controlled through impact, why you see the club head behind tour players' hands at impact, why the hands tend to be leading the shaft forward at impact, it's because they can still pull through the hitting area. It stabilizes and controls the club face. Let's think about this in a simple way without getting too complicated. How many of us have all walked a golf course and used a pull cart or a push cart, depending on how you're going to phrase it? You may think about it differently when we're done. So you take your bag, you throw it on this little 3-wheel cart, and you either pull it behind you down the fairway or you push it. What happens when you push it down the fairway? Well, think back for a second. You throw your cart on there, you start pushing it, and it tends to kind of want to shimmy and walk all over the place a little bit. It doesn't want to track perfectly straight. Now, what happens when you turn that cart around and you pull it behind you? Think about that for a second. You didn't do anything different, you didn't put any more effort into it, but as you turn around and you pull it up the fairway, it tends to follow a perfectly straight line. And when you push it, it tends to shimmy back and forth. This should be an eye-opener for you about your golf swing right now. If you're pulling it, it's always moving toward the force of movement, the center of gravity, which is you. It's always moving toward it. When you push something, it tends to move, or it's going to move, away from the force of movement in any direction, 360 possible different degrees. Unless you line the force of movement, which is you, up perfectly with the center of gravity of that push cart, it will tend to rotate around that center of gravity, which is why it shimmies. Unless you line yourself up, your force of movement, perfectly in the center of that, will always shimmy. It's just basic physics. When you pull it, it always moves towards the force of movement. So that should be an aha moment for you. When you're pushing in the golf swing, which is what 99% of the players on the planet do, because they're right hand dominant and the only thing you can do with the right hand in the downswing is push, you're going to have the same scenario where that if you can't line everything up perfectly, the club tends to oscillate. It doesn't tend to consistently release because too many forces are at work here. It's very difficult to control the club. Now, when you pull it, this is why all tour players have their hand leading the club head at impact. They can still pull through impact and then release the club. The club is now like that pull cart. It's very stable. You're able to keep the club head moving toward the force of movement, moving this way instead of this way and pushing it. All of a sudden, golf becomes a lot simpler. If you're struggling with your golf swing, if you're struggling with controlling the ball, slicing it, all of these typical things that amateurs struggle with, it's almost certainly that you're tending to over-dominate with the right side, which is what everybody does. So how do we get over this? The first drill that I want to give you is going to help you actually learn to use both sides correctly. So the first thing I want you to do is you're going to take just your left hand only, and you're going to swing just with your left hand. And what I want you to start to feel is the basic shape and swinging motion of the golf swing with just your left hand. Then I want you to take your right hand and swing left-handed and do the exact opposite. So now what you're doing is you're actually training both sides of your brain to learn the pulling movement that is critical for controlling and stabilizing that club face in the golf swing. The reason I want you to do it with both hands is training both sides of the brain, but also because you're so much more coordinated with your right hand, because you do everything in your daily life with it, it's going to help you learn and feel the proper rotation and release of the club much easier than what you may do with your left hand. A lot of times when people take the left hand, I'm going to go really slow, they tend to just kind of pull it like this and the club face is wide open and they don't realize it. You don't tend to do that with the right hand. It makes more sense to let the club release. I want you to feel that so that what you're feeling in your right hand, you can begin to translate over into the left hand. That drill alone will help you feel the proper sensations of the golf swing with the pulling motion of the left hand. The second thing is, there's several videos on the website that are going to cover this. One, if you struggle with coming over the top, there's a video called, guess what? Stop coming over the top. When you come over the top, your tendency is to take this right side. It's in a very powerful position where it can rotate. You can use your pec, your front delt, these muscles that can pitch the club this way, and that's how you come over the top. Now take your left hand and try to do the same thing. Well, now you don't have the same muscles to get the club to come over the top, and so what tends to happen when people are too left side dominant is they tend to get stuck and come too far from the inside. For most of you amateurs out there who struggle with the golf swing and struggle with coming over the top, this is a blessing in disguise. Now all of a sudden you're going to learn how to snap hook it, which I don't want that either. But as you start to get coming too far from the inside by using the left arm, you're going to start to see why you're struggling by being too right side dominant. So that's the video. I want you to watch how to stop coming over the top. The next one, most important video on the website, is the 5 minutes to the perfect release drill. Guess what it teaches you? How to release the club with your left hand. How do you get into a perfect impact position like a tour player, and then how to start training that left hand how to release the club. You've probably spent your whole life releasing with your right hand looking like this. This is all just right hand flipping motion in there. And what that's doing is just continuing to reinforce bad habits. Training this left hand is going to take a while. You don't do anything with your left hand most likely. So if you go home tonight, start challenging yourself. Try to brush your teeth with your left hand. Hopefully you won't poke your eye out. Try to cut your steak with your left arm, and you're going to realize this is very difficult just to even use your computer mouse with your left hand. Now magnify that by 100, because you're going to be swinging a golf club at 100 miles an hour trying to learn to control it with your left hand, which you've never done, and you can't even brush your teeth left-handed yet. Of course, this isn't going to happen overnight. The reality is it's going to take a while. It's going to be a struggle. You've struggled for a long time with your golf swing. Now I'm just telling you the truth about it. Unfortunately, it's predominantly left-handed when it comes to controlling the club face. Right hand's got a very important job to do. You just already skilled with the right hand, too skilled with it, too dominant with it. We've got to go the opposite direction and go left-hand dominant until you learn to control that club face and get in those impact positions. The last video I want you to check out is called the LADD drill, L-A-D-D, left arm downswing drill. And that video covers the basic movements of how to use the left arm in the downswing. So if you put these three things together, plus the training both hands to swing using the pulling motion and releasing motion with each hand independently, it's important to take your hand completely off the club. If you can't make this motion with just your left hand and feel like you have any control, then imagine as soon as you put that right hand on there, it's going to want to really take over and dominate the swing. So it's really important to start really overdoing the left side until you start coming too far from the inside. which would be a great problem for many of you amateurs who tend to come over the top and slice it. And all of a sudden you'll start to understand why you've got that golf glove in your left hand, how the tour players get in these great impact positions, and how you're going to stop struggling with the golf swing.